Okay, let's unpack this. What's 1/2 of 13?
A 6.5.
Probably what you instantly thought, right. It's the obvious answer, the one we pull straight from how we've solved similar problems before. That's what we call reproductive thinking.
Yeah, the go-to solution.
Exactly. But what if I told you there are other ways to see that simple question? Today, this deep dive isn't just about a little bit of math. It's about unlocking a more creative way of thinking, about getting off those well-worn mental paths and finding truly original ideas.
What's fascinating right from the start is just how natural it is to think reproductively. We're kind of built to be efficient, aren't we? To reuse what's worked in the past.
Sure, it's an instinct.
A powerful one. But, like we're going to explore, it can also really box us in when we're trying to be innovative.
Totally. And you're here because you want to get informed and you want to do it in a way that respects your time. You're looking for those aha moments without feeling like you're drowning in information.
Information overload is real.
It is. So think of this as your shortcut to understanding how the most creative thinkers approach the world. They look at the same stuff everyone else does, but somehow they manage to see something totally different.
That's the goal, isn't it? Seeing differently.
Yep. We've been diving deep into some compelling sources, especially excerpts from Cracking Creativity, to bring you some really practical techniques that can help you make that same shift. Our mission today is simple: to give you the tools to look at your challenges and the world around you with fresh eyes.
And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, this isn't just about individual moments of creativity. It has huge implications for progress in, well, any field.
Oh, absolutely.
When we get stuck in that reproductive mode, we genuinely miss out on possibilities that lie just outside our current way of seeing things.
And those established ways of seeing things, as comfortable as they can feel, can actually lead to some pretty big blind spots. Consider this. Back in 1899, the head of the U.S. Patent Office actually suggested they might as well shut down the whole operation because, in his opinion...
Wait, really? Shut it down?
Yeah, because everything that could be invented had been invented, or so he thought.
Wow. That really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we just assume that how things are right now is how they're always going to be?
All the time, probably.
History is just full of examples of really smart people confidently saying that future breakthroughs were impossible simply because they couldn't see beyond the current understanding.
Absolutely. Jump forward a bit to 1923, and Robert Millikan, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, no less,
Okay.
stated flat out that there was no way humanity would ever harness the power of the atom.
Hard to believe that now.
Right. Or think about a guy named Philip Rice. Back in 1861, he invented a machine that could transmit music basically on the verge of inventing the telephone.
So close.
But all the communication experts in Germany told him there was no demand for such a thing because, well, the telegraph was perfectly adequate.
Perfectly adequate. Famous last words.
15 years later, Alexander Graham Bell became a millionaire with his telephone, and guess who was one of his first big markets?
Let me guess.
Germany.
Germany. Yep. What really stands out in those stories is a kind of lack of imagination, maybe? An inability to envision needs or possibilities beyond what was immediately apparent with the tech or knowledge of the time.
It gets even more relatable. Xerography, that's the fancy word for photocopying.
Right.
Invented by Chester Carlson in 1938, he took his idea to virtually every major corporation, including giants like IBM and Kodak.
The big names.
And they all turned him down. Their logic: carbon paper was cheap and everywhere, so why would anyone pay for an expensive copying machine?
The it's good enough trap again.
Exactly. Then there's the story of Fred Smith, who, as a student at Yale, came up with the idea for Federal Express overnight national delivery.
FedEx, yeah.
The U.S. Postal Service, UPS, even his own business professor, basically every expert in the delivery business,
What did they say?
predicted it would fail miserably. They were so stuck in their existing understanding that the idea of paying a premium for speed and reliability just seemed, well, crazy.
These historical moments really drive home the danger of being intellectually overconfident,
Yeah.
Thinking that our past successes or the way things are currently done represent the absolute limit of what's possible.
Getting too attached to what has worked.
Yeah, it can really blind us to revolutionary potential.
Okay, so we see the trouble with just sticking to old ways of thinking. But how do we actually break out of that? How do we start to see things differently?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Our sources point to the simple but powerful act of changing our focus. Think about those 2 rows of dots in that classic optical illusion.
The line's illusion.
Yeah. By themselves, the rows look the same length,
Yeah.
but when you add converging lines, suddenly the top row appears longer, even though it hasn't physically changed.
Right, the context changes everything.
Just by changing the context, your perception shifts.
That visual is a perfect way to understand how our minds work, I think. The techniques we're going to talk about are designed to be like those converging lines, to change your mental context and allow you to interpret the same information in totally new and unexpected ways.
And it's not just about tricks of the eye. Take something as basic as 1 plus 1.
Okay, equals 2, right?
What we're taught, it equals 2, and we usually think of that in terms of separate things coming together. 1 apple plus another apple makes 2 apples. Simple.
Standard stuff.
But what if we shift our perspective to think about, say, area? Imagine 2 strips of tape. If you put them end to end, you have 2 lengths.
Okay.
But if you overlap them a bit, suddenly you have 3 distinct sections.
Ah, I see where you're going.
And if you cross one completely over the other, you create 4 distinct areas. So 1 plus 1 can be 3 or even 4, depending on how you choose to see it.
That simple math examples is brilliant for showing how just tweaking our point of view, our frame of reference, can unlock multiple interpretations and meanings from the exact same starting point.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting. Our sources really highlight the benefit of getting our thoughts out of our heads. Apparently, when adults actually write down or speak about a problem,
Externalizing it.
yeah, they tend to perform much better than if they just try to solve it silently in their minds. And to really illustrate this, there's a classic brain teaser called the Wasson selection task.
Oh, I think I know this one. The cards.
That's the one. Picture 4 cards in front of you, an E, a K, a 4, and a 7. You're told that every card has a letter on one side and a number on the other.
Okay, got it.
The rule is, if a card has a vowel on one side, then it has an even number on the other. You can only flip over 2 cards to see if the rule is being followed. Which 2 would you choose?
Okay, this is a puzzle that tripped up a lot of people. The immediate instinct is to go for the E.
Because it's a vowel.
Right. And the 4, because it's an even number, seems to directly relate to the rule.
Makes sense initially.
But if you think about it logically, well, flipping the E is important if there's an odd number on the back. The rule is broken.
Definitely need to check the E.
But the 4 doesn't actually tell you anything definitive about the rule. The rule doesn't say what must be on the other side of an even number. It could be a vowel or a consonant.
Exactly. The card we really need to turn over, besides the E, is the 7, the odd number.
Right, because if there's a vowel on the back of the 7, then we know the rule is false. Because the rule states a vowel must have an even number on the other side.
It's surprising, but yeah, over 90% of people get this wrong when they just try to figure it out in their heads.
And what's really telling is that when you present the exact same underlying logic, but in a different, more relatable context.
Like what?
Imagine the cards represent destinations, say New York, Los Angeles, and modes of transport like train, plane. The rule becomes, if you go to New York, then you must go by plane.
Okay, more concrete.
So if the visible cards are New York, Los Angeles, plane, and train, suddenly most people correctly identify that you need to check New York to see if they went by train, breaking the rule, and train to see if they went to New York, also breaking the rule.
Ah, so the core logic is identical to the letter number problem.
Exactly. But changing the scenario dramatically affects how we reason. It really shows how the way a problem is structured, or how we frame it, influences our thinking.
So just by articulating the rule, maybe talking it through or writing it down.
You're much more likely to spot the crucial element that the odd number card, or the train card in the other example, is the one that could potentially disprove the rule.
It really highlights how our initial silent, analytical thinking can often lead us astray. Okay, now let's switch gears a bit and consider how we make assumptions. We're often taught that gaining knowledge follows a specific order. Observe, gather information, and then come up with general principles or theories.
Yeah, the standard inductive approach. Observe first, generalize later.
Right. It's definitely valuable, but our sources point out that it can also limit us. Think about Einstein.
Okay.
He actually felt that you could never create truly new knowledge just by analyzing existing information. He questioned how any conclusion could ever really go beyond the initial data you started with.
Interesting point. So what did he do?
He took a different route. He worked at a higher level of abstraction. He boldly explored fundamental principles like the speed of light being constant.
Even when he couldn't immediately prove those principles with experiments.
Exactly. He started with the big ideas first.
It's kind of a reverse way of thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Starting with these big abstract ideas and then reasoning downwards. Galileo used thought experiments in a similar way, imagining hypothetical situations to explore concepts.
This willingness to question basic assumptions, even without hard evidence at first, seems like a key characteristic of productive thinking.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about huge scientific discoveries. Even the way we define a problem, whether we make it broad or narrow, has a big impact on the kinds of solutions we come up with.
How so?
Well, more specific problem statements tend to lead to quicker, more immediate fixes,
Mhm.
but they often stifle really creative, out-of-the-box thinking. Think about the difference between trying to solve the oil stain on your driveway
Okay, pretty specific.
versus the much bigger problem of environmental pollution.
Right. One has a pretty clear localized solution, maybe some degreaser. The other demands a much more systemic and innovative approach.
Precisely. Similarly, if you're trying to develop a new computer keyboard, that's a pretty specific challenge compared to trying to find a new niche in the global information business. The level of generality really either opens up or closes down the possibilities for solutions.
That makes sense. Can you give another example?
Sure. Consider the shipping industry back in the 1950s. Experts thought it was dying because costs were rising and deliveries were slow.
Okay.
Their go-to thinking, their reproductive thinking, was to focus on making ships faster and reducing crew sizes and fuel consumption, all very specific, existing ways of approaching the problem.
Trying to optimize the current model.
Exactly. But costs kept going up because they weren't looking at the core issue from a wider perspective. They were too focused on the specifics.
They were so focused on tweaking the existing model, the ship itself, that they completely missed the bigger picture.
Right. It wasn't until someone looked beyond just the ships and considered the entire system, how goods were loaded, unloaded, stored, transported between different modes, that truly innovative solutions emerged.
Like containerization.
Like containerization,
Yeah.
which completely revitalized the industry. They had to broaden their perspective.
This really highlights the importance of finding the right level of generality when you're trying to come up with ideas. You need to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, where you're not so specific that you limit your options, but not so broad that you can't even get started. It's about finding the best vantage point to gather ideas, rather than getting bogged down in tiny details too early in the process.
Okay, now let's talk about something we often overlook. How much our language, the words we use, influences our thinking. Aristotle, way back.
Yeah, he was onto this ages ago.
He understood that words and how we string them together are powerful tools that both reflect and shape how we think. He believed that the very words we use to describe a problem have a significant impact on how we try to solve it.
That's a really profound idea when you stop and think about it. It connects to that water lilies riddle, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, the classic one. There's a patch of water lilies on a lake, and it doubles in size every 24 hours.
Yep.
On the first day of summer, there's just one water lily. Exactly 60 days later, the entire lake is covered. On which day is the lake exactly half covered?
The way it's worded, double, 24, 1, which day 60? It almost makes you want to just divide 60 by 2.
Right. Say the 30th day. That's the intuitive reproductive answer based on the numbers presented.
But because the lilies are growing exponentially, doubling every single day, the correct answer is actually just one day before the lake is full.
Day 59.
Day 59. The wording subtly steers us toward a simple linear calculation when the reality is exponential growth.
So our thoughts themselves might be fluid, but when we put a problem into words, we can unintentionally limit our thinking.
Yeah, just grabbing the first words that come to mind can actually hinder the creative process sometimes. However, the flip side is powerful too. Changing the way we word a problem can suddenly unlock a whole rush of new ideas.
Like the example of asking a team, how can we become more productive?
Right, which often gets you blank stares or generic answers.
But rephrasing it to, how can we make our jobs easier?
Suddenly you get a flood of really innovative, practical suggestions because it connects to their direct experience in a different way.
It's amazing how such a small tweak in the phrasing can have such a big effect. Even changing a single word can dramatically alter the meaning and send your thoughts in totally new directions.
Like the kids are flying planes.
Paints a very specific, maybe alarming picture.
Versus just changing one letter. The lids are flying planes. Totally different image, different possibilities.
Okay, so this awareness of language is a really valuable tool for productive thinking. Our sources suggest actively playing around with how you state your problem.
Yeah, identify the key words, especially the verbs and nouns. Try swapping them out multiple times. See what new angles emerge.
How can I sell more bottles?
could become.
How can I bottle more sales? Which shifts the focus from the physical product to the act of closing deals, maybe thinking about packaging deals differently or something.
Or how can I improve customer relations? Might become.
How can I customize related improvements? Which suggests a more targeted, personalized, nuanced approach rather than a blanket one.
Messing with the verbs and nouns like that forces us to consider perspectives we wouldn't normally think of. It's like finding hidden doors in our minds.
Exactly.
Now let's get into some specific techniques you can actually use for productive thinking. The first one we want to talk about is called word chain. Okay, word chain. The idea here is to create a kind of mental chain reaction, right? One word triggers another, setting off a cascade of creative associations.
So how does it work?
You start by identifying the core theme of your problem. What single word best captures the essence of it for you right now? Write that down.
Just one word.
Then just let your mind wander and list any words that pop into your head that are connected somehow to that initial word. Don't censor yourself at all. Just let one word lead to the next. Free associate.
Okay, so you build up this chain of words, maybe for a few minutes. Then what?
Then you go back and read through your list. Jot down any initial reactions or comments that come to mind. The key is to look for any recurring themes or issues that keep showing up in your word associations,
Why those recurring ones?
because they're often worth digging into further. They likely have some significance to the problem you're trying to solve, maybe something underlying you haven't articulated. Also, pay attention to any words that spark a strong emotional reaction that can often be a clue to something important you might be overlooking.
Interesting. Okay, another technique our sources mention is called switching gender.
Yeah, this one's a bit different. The idea is that the way men and women often interact or are perceived to interact can provide a powerful metaphor for how we perceive things working in business and the world.
So it's about perspective taking.
Exactly. To get a different perspective on a business situation, try this. Close your eyes, relax, and imagine yourself in various everyday scenarios. Maybe walking down the street, bumping into a friend, being in a crowded place, at work, a social event, even just relaxing at home.
Okay, visualizing these scenes.
But in each scenario, really vividly imagine yourself as the opposite sex. Physically, emotionally, mentally. Really try to embody that perspective.
Then open your eyes and look at the business situation you're working on from that opposite sex viewpoint. Ask yourself, how would I see this if I were the opposite sex?
And just write down whatever comes to mind. This exercise can sometimes reveal surprising new angles and insights that you wouldn't have considered from your usual standpoint. It shakes up assumptions.
Okay, let's move on to the friends and enemies technique. What's that about?
This involves imagining two different scenarios to understand different ways of persuading someone. First, picture yourself as the same gender as another person, a good friend, and you're just chatting casually.
Okay, easy conversation.
You want to share one of your beliefs about the topic you're working on and have your friend agree with you. How would you approach that? What exactly would you say? How would you say it?
So focus on the personal connection, maybe shared values.
Probably. Jot down those thoughts. The ideas that come from this scenario should feel quite personal and friendly. Now, the second scenario.
The enemy.
Well, maybe not enemy, but someone who disagrees. The person is still the same gender, but now they're not a friend. You're at a busy, noisy restaurant. You know they disagree with your belief, but it's really important for the company that they come around to your way of thinking.
Higher stakes, more challenging environment.
Right. Again, what would you say and how would you say it? The ideas that come from this situation will likely be more focused on results, maybe more objective, arguments, data, logic.
So you compare the insights from both.
Exactly. Comparing what you'd say to a friend versus an adversary can reveal both the personal rapport-building arguments and the more objective, results-oriented ones you might need.
Interesting. How does that apply here?
That leads to the imagine you are the problem technique. It builds on that Freudian concept. Ask yourself, how would I feel if I were this problem?
Okay. Like embodying the problem itself.
Yes. What would it say to me if I were the problem itself? How would I feel if I were the idea I'm trying to develop? What kind of recommendation would I, as the problem or the idea, make?
That sounds abstract. Is there an example?
Yeah, really good one. Managers at a utility company were trying to figure out how to reduce their capital equipment costs. For 3 months, they would spend time imagining themselves as a single kilowatt of electricity.
As a kilowatt.
Yep, traveling through the company's entire power system. By experiencing each stage of the journey from that perspective, the generation, the transmission lines, the substations, they gained a really deep, empathetic understanding of the system's complexities.
And that led to...
They were able to identify bottlenecks, inefficiencies, stresses on the system they hadn't seen before, which eventually led to a redesigned maintenance plan that drastically cut costs. Embodying the problem gave them unique insights.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about questions. Geniuses are often known for asking lots of questions, right?
Absolutely. They're typically characterized by intense curiosity and a real drive to ask questions, not just find answers. The questions technique encourages you to tap into that childlike sense of wonder.
So take the challenge you want to think about.
And just start dissecting it by asking as many questions as you possibly can. Think about someone like Leonardo da Vinci, constantly questioning everything, even basic principles, or Einstein wondering about gravity and light. Don't just focus on finding the right answers. Really concentrate on asking bold, probing, even seemingly naive questions.
How do you get into that mindset? It's easy to just ask the obvious questions.
Our sources suggest trying this. Close your eyes and picture yourself at your most curious age, maybe around 12 years old. Try to vividly recall the details of that time. Holidays, friends, school days. Really try to experience being there again, not just remembering it.
Okay, accessing that younger self.
Now, looking at your current problem through the eyes of that 12-year-old, what kinds of questions would they ask? Their innocent and unconstrained curiosity can often reveal hidden assumptions or aspects of the problem that you might have overlooked as an adult with all your ingrained knowledge.
Like asking why repeatedly.
Exactly. Don't dismiss those simple questions. Okay, moving towards visual approaches.
Many creative people think visually, don't they? Like
Yeah.
Feynman.
Richard Feynman had a strong preference for visual thinking. He actually revolutionized physics by using diagrams, not just equations, to describe quantum electrodynamics.
The Feynman diagrams.
Yep, they made previously unimaginable concepts much more accessible. And Einstein, when working through complex problems, relied heavily on visual and spatial forms of reasoning, rather than just math or words.
He said words didn't play a big role.
In his core thinking process, yeah. He even described his philosophy of science with a simple sketch in a letter to his friend Solovine, showing experiences leading to axioms, leading back to experiences. Very visual.
In Darwin.
Let's not forget Charles Darwin. His diagrams, his sketches of the tree of life, were absolutely crucial in developing his theory of evolution. They helped him map out relationships and grasp the complexity. Within 15 months of sketching his first tree diagram, he'd essentially cracked the major problems of his theory.
So the visual thinking techniques encourage us to move beyond just words and numbers.
Exactly. Embrace the power of images in your thinking.
What are some specific visual techniques?
Well, mind mapping and theme mapping are both really effective tools for organizing your thoughts externally, making them visible.
Mind mapping is pretty well known, right? Start in the center and branch out.
Yeah, you start with your central problem or idea and then branch out with related ideas and concepts, connecting them as they naturally occur to you. It's very organic, very free-flowing, good for exploring connections.
And theme mapping, how's it different?
Theme mapping is a little more structured. You still start with your main subject in the middle, but then you predefine maybe 6 to 8 significant themes or components that relate to it.
Okay, predefined category.
Right. For example, if your goal is to add value to your organization, your themes might be things like technology, personnel, delivery methods, customer interaction, etc. Then, within each of those themes, you brainstorm, say, 8 specific ideas or ways to add value.
So you fill out the whole map, theme by theme.
Yeah. By filling out the whole map, you can end up with a really diverse range of new ideas, and the structured approach helps make sure you're considering all the key aspects of your problem.
Okay, what about system mapping? Sounds more complex.
It takes a broader perspective. It focuses on the relationships and how different elements influence each other within a system, rather than just looking at isolated objects or components.
How do you build one?
You start with a central word or phrase for your subject, then identify the key components that interact with it. For an insurance agency, that might be insurance providers, corporate customer, and the broader environment, like regulations or the economy.
Okay, the main players.
Then you map out the influences between these components, recognizing that every influence is both a cause and an effect. Things feed back on each other. The goal is to see circles of influence, rather than just simple, linear cause and effect chains.
Seeing the feedback loops.
Precisely. This kind of mapping can be incredibly useful for actually redefining the problem you're trying to solve.
Like the insurance agency example.
Yeah, they initially focused on just improving their existing services, but by using system mapping to see the whole picture, how provider changes affected customer needs, how regulations impacted both, they ended up completely rethinking their entire business model, maybe moving towards risk management consulting instead of just selling policies.
So it helps you see the story of how the parts interact and where you might intervene.
Exactly how patterns of change are emerging and how you might be able to influence those patterns more effectively.
Got it. What about force field analysis?
This is a really helpful method developed by Kurt Lewin for looking at the different forces that are either helping you achieve a specific goal, the driving forces, or holding you back, the restraining forces.
Driving versus restraining. Okay.
For example, if your goal is to increase sales, the driving forces might be having a great product, a strong marketing campaign, maybe a motivated sales team.
Things pushing you forward.
Right. While the restraining forces could be things like what your competitors are doing, a downturn in the economy, maybe internal inefficiencies.
Things holding you back.
By visually mapping out these driving and restraining forces, maybe even assigning strengths to them, you can get a realistic sense of your chances of success. But more importantly,
Yeah.
it helps you identify new ways you might be able to influence the situation. Can you strengthen a driving force? Can you weaken or remove a restraining force? Maybe you could introduce bundled financing options to counter competitor pricing, or offer enhanced customer support to overcome negative perceptions. It helps strategize.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that just writing can sometimes limit creativity.
Yeah, sometimes the very act of trying to verbalize or write down our thoughts can actually constrain them, especially visual or spatial ideas. Visual brainstorming encourages you to use drawings and sketches instead.
Like the example of trying to describe your best friend's face.
Exactly. Trying to describe it just with words can actually interfere with your ability to recognize them. But if you sketch their features, even badly, it helps you visualize them and find them more quickly in a crowd.
So apply that to problem solving.
Yeah. Try sketching out potential solutions to your problem. Don't worry about artistic skill. They could be abstract, symbolic, stick figures, whatever. Then, look at your sketches, see what they spark, and refine them. Create new sketches based on those ideas until a potential solution starts to emerge from your visual exploration.
Okay. What about juxtaposing unlikely information? Sounds intriguing.
This technique is specifically designed to break you out of your usual, often linear thinking patterns. We're often taught to think logically, step by step from problem to solution.
Like illustration A in the source material.
Right, carefully choosing the most promising approach based on past experience,
Yeah.
discarding anything that seems too out there early on.
Which leads to safe, predictable ideas.
Often, yes. Not necessarily bad, but maybe not very creative. The alternative, illustration B, is about holding off on judgment. Allow a free flow of thoughts, even seemingly unrelated or silly ones. Let them interact and spark even more ideas until you have a real breakthrough.
So don't evaluate too soon.
Exactly. Often the first ideas that come to mind are the most familiar, the reproductive ones. True creative thinking requires you to keep that flow going long enough, maybe pushing through an initial dry spell, to get past the obvious and stumble upon something truly original and imaginative. Delaying judgment is key.
And sometimes the simplest techniques work too, like just listing ideas.
Absolutely. Just listing ideas is a surprisingly powerful way to boost your conceptual ability. It sounds basic, but it doesn't require any big changes in how you think.
How does it help?
It taps into our natural tendency to be a little bit compulsive, maybe? But more importantly, the act of forcing yourself to generate a quantity of ideas actually makes you more fluent and flexible in your thinking. You get past the easy ones and have to stretch.
Quantity leads to quality, in a way.
It often can, yes.
Yeah.
And related to that is elaborating on ideas. Because true brilliance often lies not just in that initial flash of an idea, but in the persistent effort to develop it, refine it, make it bigger and better.
Like Edison with the light bulb.
Perfect example. He didn't invent the incandescent light bulb. Others had worked on it. But he took an existing idea and relentlessly experimented, elaborated, perfected it into a practical, long-lasting consumer product. And then he didn't stop there.
He built the whole system around it.
Right. The power generation, the distribution grid, the sockets. He elaborated on the initial idea massively. Or Alexander Graham Bell, his invention of the telephone, then inspired Edison to elaborate on the concept of recording sound, leading to the phonograph.
Even artists do this.
Oh, yeah. Thinkers and artists like Tchaikovsky or the writer Paul Valery were known for their intense periods of refining, reworking, elaborating on their initial themes or concepts. It's often in the development that the genius truly shows.
So how do you elaborate effectively?
Ask yourself questions about the idea. What are its opposites? What are its negative aspects? Can I flip the positive and negative parts? Should I turn it completely around, consider it from a different perspective, reverse the roles, try something totally unexpected?
Keep pushing and prodding the idea.
Exactly. To a truly creative mind, all ideas are constantly evolving, always capable of being improved, expanded upon, viewed differently.
Okay, another habit. Keeping written records. Why is that so important?
It serves multiple purposes. First, obviously, it preserves your thoughts so you don't forget them. But maybe more importantly, the act of writing pushes you to clarify and develop even more ideas.
Like Leonardo da Vinci's
A
notebooks.
fantastic example. They weren't just random jottings. They were a space for him to explore, connect, sketch, question, and revisit ideas over time. This allowed him to build upon his concepts, leading to inventions way ahead of his era,
And Edison did this too.
meticulously. He recorded observations, ideas he got from other fields, patents he didn't pursue. It created this rich external database that his subconscious mind could draw upon.
So writing it down plants seeds.
Kinda, yeah. It plants information in your subconscious, and connections can form later, sometimes leading to those sudden aha moments or mind pops, even long after you initially jotted something down. Think Archimedes in the bath, Poincaré stepping onto a bus, Darwin reflecting on Malthus. The idea pops up because the groundwork was laid, often in writing.
Right. Now, Dean Keith Simonton's theory about genius, forming novel combinations.
Yeah, his research suggests that what really sets geniuses apart isn't necessarily just raw intelligence, but their ability to generate and select more novel combinations of existing ideas than the average person.
Like that bent square illusion you mentioned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Putting a perfect square against a specific background, a combination, changes how we perceive the square itself. Similarly, creativity often happens when we tilt the bowl of ice cream, our existing knowledge and information forcing it out of familiar grooves and combining elements in new and unexpected ways to create fresh insights.
So how do we deliberately make these novel combinations?
There are several techniques. Parameters and variations is one. You break down a product, service, or problem into its key characteristics or parameters.
Like for a chair. Material, number of legs, height, purpose.
Exactly. Then for each parameter, you list multiple variations: wood, metal, plastic, 3 legs, 4 legs, 1 pedestal, tall, short, for sitting, for display.
Okay, list parameters and variations.
Then you randomly select different combinations of these variations. Maybe a plastic chair with 1 leg for display, a tall wooden chair with 3 legs for sitting. This forced combination can generate entirely new forms and ideas.
Like the car wash owner example.
Yeah, he combined the parameters service type, variation.self-service, customer, variation.dogs, and equipment, variation.brushes, to create a self-service dog wash, a novel combination.
What's attribute listing? Similar.
A bit more direct, maybe. You list all the key attributes of your current product or service, and then you systematically go through each attribute and ask, how could I modify this? Could we make it bigger, smaller, stronger, weaker, reverse it, combine it with something else?
So modifying existing features.
Yes. Then there's forced connections. This takes a different tack. You prompt yourself to find connections between a specific challenge you're facing and seemingly unrelated characteristics, objects, or even just random words from a list.
Like connecting improving team communication with the word bicycle.
Exactly. Seems random, but forcing yourself to make connections, maybe bicycle makes you think of balance, teamwork, tandem, individual effort, needing maintenance, different speeds might spark an unexpected idea about communication dynamics. Even if many connections seem silly, one might be gold.
Okay, you can even use pictures as idea stimulant.
Yeah, just grab some random pictures from magazines, online, anywhere. Then look at the picture and force yourself to find connections between what you see, objects, actions, moods, colors, and the challenge you're working on.
Like the Japanese perfume company example.
Right. The executive gave his team pictures of a king crab to spark ideas for how to survive tough economic times. Seems totally unrelated, but the crab's attributes, hard shell for protection, claws for defense, ability to scavenge, moving sideways, apparently sparked useful business strategy ideas.
Interesting. What about wishful thinking? Is that just daydreaming?
It starts that way, but it's structured. You state all your ideal wishes related to a problem, no matter how unrealistic they might seem initially. I wish parking meters would pay me. I wish my car would park itself. I wish I never had to look for parking.
Okay, wild wishes. Then what?
Then, the crucial step. Put on your realist hat and look at those wishes. Ask, what's the underlying principle here, or how could we get closer to this wish in reality? Wishing police could instantly see when a spot becomes free might lead to the practical idea of sensors in spots connected to an app. The wish becomes a springboard.
Got it. Now, the power of tacit information, what's that about? Subconscious cues.
Exactly. It reminds us that we can be influenced by information or cues that we don't even consciously notice or register. The experiment where a subtle, almost imperceptible nudge on a string helped people solve a tricky puzzle demonstrates this.
How does that apply to idea generation?
Well, in group settings, even just having people silently generate ideas on paper or Post-its and then displaying them can provide these kinds of subconscious cues to others. Seeing someone else's unrelated idea might trigger a connection in your own mind without you even realizing why.
So silent brainstorming can be powerful too.
It can. Shuffling relationships is another combination technique. You list different elements or components of a problem and then randomly pair them up to see what new solutions might emerge.
Like pairing refrigerator and electrical power source.
Yeah, that random pairing might spark the idea of a battery backup for a fridge during power outages. Or, in business, pairing empowerment with control might lead to insights about the paradoxes of delegation.
Okay, reversals sound fun, turning things on their head.
Exactly. It's a great way to shake up your conventional thinking. Take statements related to a problem and completely reverse them. Instead of, I have a mint julep, think, the mint julep has me.
How does that help?
Well, the mint julep has me might spark ideas about immersive experiences, maybe scented shower attachments that surround you with the aroma, or drinks that change color based on your mood. It forces a new perspective. Cars control parking time could lead to dynamic pricing or systems based on how long you plan to stay.
So reverse assumptions and see what happens.
Right. Dentists without tools. A chair that's deliberately flat. These reversals force us to look at familiar things in totally new ways and question the status quo.
And sometimes just looking at it another way is enough.
Often, yes. Think about mathematical equations. Having two different ways of expressing the same value on either side of the equal sign is what allows us to manipulate the equation and find a solution. If it was just XXX, you couldn't do anything.
So finding a different angle on the problem.
Exactly. Like Carl Gauss as a schoolboy, supposedly summing the numbers from 1 to 100. Instead of adding 1 plus 2 plus 3, he saw you could pair 1 plus 100, 2 plus 99, 3 plus 98. Each pair sums to 101, and there are 50 pairs. A different perspective led to a much quicker, easier answer.
Okay, what about paradoxical thinking?
This encourages you to try and turn a problem or a situation into a paradox, a statement that seems contradictory or absurd, but might hold a deeper truth upon investigation.
Why would that help?
That apparent contradiction can actually spark intellectual progress. Niels Bohr's work on quantum mechanics is a great example. He had to embrace the paradox that an electron could behave as both a particle and a wave depending on how you observed it. Wrestling with the paradox led to breakthroughs.
So frame your challenge as a paradox. How can we be more flexible and more stable?
Something like that. It forces deeper thinking. Then there's working backward.
Starting from the end goal.
Exactly. Imagine you've already achieved the ideal solution, the perfect outcome. Now, systematically think backward from that point. What would have had to happen right before that? And before that? What were the necessary steps, resources, decisions? What obstacles would you have had to overcome?
It helps map out the path.
Yes, it clarifies the steps needed and can highlight potential roadblocks you might not see thinking forwards.
Okay, the continuum technique. What's that?
This helps you visually assess areas for improvement. First, identify the most significant factors or characteristics related to your problem or goal.
Like for customer service, response time, friendliness, problem resolution.
Perfect. Then, for each factor, create a continuum or a scale from the very best possible scenario, ideal, to the very worst possible scenario.
Best to worst response time, friendliest to rudest interaction.
Right. Then, honestly, assess where you currently stand on each continuum. This visual map allows you to see clearly where the biggest gaps are and what specific steps you might need to take to move closer to that ideal state on each important dimension. Think about creating a continuum for the characteristics of a perfect cup of coffee: temperature, aroma, taste, strength, crema. Where does your current coffee fall?
Helps prioritize improvements. Got it. Now, analogy seems like a really core creative technique.
It absolutely is. Finding parallels between seemingly different subjects is incredibly powerful for generating insights.
Like Helen Keller connecting water from a pump to the word water.
A profound example of analogy leading to understanding. Or Newton wondering if the force pulling an apple down was the same force keeping the moon in orbit, comparing a terrestrial vent to a celestial one. He was looking for similar dynamics in different contexts.
So how do you use analogies systematically?
Our sources suggest a few steps. First, choose a parallel world or domain that's different from your problem area and might have similar underlying dynamics. Maybe nature, sports, computers, cooking, warfare.
Okay, pick a different world.
Second, list key features, processes, or associations related to that world. What comes to mind when you think of computers? Processing, memory, networks, bugs, upgrades, input-output.
Brainstorm associations.
Third, force connections. Look at your list of associations from the parallel world and try to draw analogies between them and the problem you're trying to solve. How could the concept of a computer bug apply to managing a lumberyard? Maybe it sparks ideas about inventory errors or process glitches.
Finding functional similarities.
Exactly. Looking for similar patterns or functions in different settings.
What's the difference between analogy and essence?
Essence is maybe a level deeper. It involves identifying the core, fundamental principle or function at the very heart of your problem, stripping away the specifics. Then you look for examples of that same core principle at work in completely different worlds.
So if the essence of a new marketing strategy is attraction,
You'd ask, where else do we see attraction at work? Bees are attracted to honey pollen. Magnets attract metal. Gravity attracts objects. Plants are attracted to sunlight. Then you'd examine how that attraction works in those other domains and see if it sparks ideas for your marketing.
finding the core principle first, okay? And worlds of special interest, using your hobbies.
Yeah, leveraging your own personal hobbies, passions, or areas of expertise outside your main work can be a fantastic source of unexpected solutions. The example given is a physiologist who also had deep engineering knowledge. He was able to solve a complex puzzle related to designing an artificial kidney loop because he could draw on principles from both fields.
So don't compartmentalize your knowledge.
Exactly. Your unique combination of interests is a creative asset.
Excursions sound like fun, imaginary journeys.
They are. It involves deliberately taking an imaginary journey to a completely different environment, a jungle, a desert, outer space, ancient Rome, and then looking at your problem from the perspective of being in that environment.
How does that help?
The unfamiliar setting forces you to break your usual associations. The Sidewinder missile's heat-seeking guidance system was supposedly inspired by an engineer on a desert excursion who observed how a Sidewinder rattlesnake tracks its prey by sensing its body heat. The desert context provided the novel stimulus.
Or imagining marketing fabric in the Wild West.
Right. What challenges would you face? How would you transport it? Who are the customers? What are their needs? The excursion forces new questions and potentially new solutions.
And the world of Einstein, is that different?
It refers more to Einstein's use of imaginary, often metaphorical scenarios or thought experiments, the Denkin experiments, to explore abstract physical principles, like imagining riding on a beam of light or people falling in elevators. He used these vivid mental scenarios to reason about complex ideas before the math was fully worked out.
So using metaphors and mental simulations.
Yes. Scenario writing is related, but maybe more structured. You create a detailed imaginary scenario or story related to your challenge, and then you try to solve the problem within that fictional context.
Like imagining your company is a besieged fortress.
Exactly. How would you defend it? How would you get supplies? How would you communicate? Then you translate the solutions from the fortress scenario back to your business challenges. Or imagining marketing your product to cave dwellers. What are their basic needs? How would you communicate value?
It forces you to simplify and focus on fundamentals.
Often, yes. Or the example of imagining you need your family's approval for a marriage. What arguments would you use? How would you address their concerns? Then apply that thinking to getting buy-in for a project at work.
Okay. Einstein also preferred the world of images.
Right, we touched on his visual thinking. This technique encourages you to represent your challenge primarily as a symbolic mental image, consciously blocking out verbal thoughts as much as possible.
Just hold the image.
Hold the image, manipulate it in your mind, and then try to draw analogies between your mental image and potential solutions. The example is the puzzle of rearranging 6 matches to spell nothing. The solution involves forming the word nothing, which requires a shift from geometric thinking to verbal symbolic thinking prompted by the visual manipulation.
What about collage? Actually making something visual.
Yes, this is a more physical visual technique. You create a visual representation of your problem or goal using a collection of images, words, headlines cut from magazines, drawings, whatever resonates. Arranging these elements visually can spark new perspectives, reveal hidden connections, and stimulate different ways of seeing the challenge.
And metaphor itself.
Hugely important in creative thought.
Hmm.
We use metaphors constantly, often without thinking. Darwin's Tree of Evolution, William James's streams of thought, even simple ones like argument is war. Actively looking for or creating new metaphors for your problem can unlock powerful new ways of understanding it. What is your project like? A journey, a construction site, a garden. Each metaphor suggests different actions and pitfalls.
So many techniques. We also need to beware of faulty assumptions, right?
Absolutely crucial. Our intuition can lead us astray. The classic Susan example illustrates this perfectly. People are told Susan is shy, helpful, meek, tidy, passionate about detail, etc. Then they're asked if it's more likely that Susan is a librarian or a librarian who is also active in the feminist movement.
And people often say librarian and feminist.
Yes, even though logically the set of librarians who are also feminists must be smaller than the set of all librarians. But because the description seems to fit the stereotype of a feminist in some people's minds, they fall for the conjunction fallacy, driven by the representativeness heuristic. Our assumptions and biases can override logic.
We need to check our gut feelings sometimes.
Definitely. And don't forget recycling ideas.
Building on existing stuff.
Yeah, it's a hallmark of creative genius, taking existing ideas, technologies, or concepts, sometimes from completely different fields, and transforming them into something new.
Like radar technology leading to the microwave oven?
Perfect example. Or Aristotle's ideas influencing Francis Bacon centuries later. Hindu and Buddhist concepts influencing Thoreau. Japanese temple design influencing Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie homes. That weak adhesive that 3M didn't know what to do with eventually becoming Post-it notes, thanks to someone else recycling the idea for a new purpose.
So, view subjects and ideas as constantly evolving.
Exactly. As organisms that can be adapted, combined, and transformed into something new, nothing comes from nothing.
Okay, getting near the end of the techniques. Are your ideas crazy enough? What does that mean?
It addresses the issue that sometimes our imaginations get stuck within the boundaries of what we already know and understand what our sources call structured imagination. We generate ideas, but they're often just variations on existing themes.
Like the train conductor accident example. People suggest familiar safety measures.
Right. Their past experience limits truly novel, crazy ideas. To break free, you might need techniques specifically designed to force wilder thinking, like the Crazy 8 exercise, forcing yourself to sketch 8 distinct ideas in 8 minutes, or playing an unrelated ideas game where you have to connect random concepts.
Deliberately pushing for absurdity.
To break the mold, yes. Crossbreeding is another way combining attributes of two totally unrelated things, like what if you combined a restaurant and a cat?
Restaurant plus cat. Maybe a cafe where cats roam. Or food shaped like cats, or
maybe the cat attribute is independence or agility, leading to a restaurant with highly automated ordering or super fast table turnover. The forced combination sparks thought.
And idea cards. That sounds collaborative.
It is. It's a group technique where individuals write down ideas related to a challenge on separate cards. The cards are then shuffled and redistributed or drawn randomly, and people have to build upon or combine the ideas they receive. It sparks new connections through random combinations of different people's thoughts.
Speaking of collaboration, that's important too, isn't it?
Hugely important. David Bohm, the physicist, observed that the breakthroughs of thinkers like Einstein often came about through really honest, open dialogue with colleagues. They weren't just debating, they were thinking together.
What makes that kind of collaboration work?
Bohm highlighted principles like suspending judgment. Not necessarily agreeing, but listening openly, valuing different views as ways to enrich understanding, and being completely honest about your own assumptions and reactions. The Greeks had a word for this kind of deep, collective dialogue. Koinonia.
And the environment matters too.
Definitely. Creating the right kind of environment, one that's stimulating, maybe with music, visual aids, comfortable seating, plays a crucial role in fostering creativity, whether individually or in groups.
And the facilitator's role in group creativity.
It's key. The facilitator's job isn't to provide the solutions, but to liberate the creative thinking of the group, to guide the process, ask probing questions, ensure everyone contributes, and protect the space for unconventional ideas. Think of Oppenheimer managing the diverse geniuses on the Manhattan Project. His role was orchestrating their collective brilliance.
So group brainstorming techniques are valuable.
Very much so. Collaboration is often key. Think Michelangelo's workshop or the Disney animation studios. Diverse perspectives are gold. Structured techniques can help harness that.
Like brainwriting.
Yeah, where people silently write ideas on cards or paper and then pass them around for others to build on. It avoids the loudest voice dominating and allows for cross-pollination of ideas. The gallery technique is similar, using flip charts around the room, idea card exchanges, as we mentioned. These structured approaches ensure everyone contributes and ideas get combined.
What about storyboarding?
That's often used in planning or process design. But it's also great for idea generation. You break down a topic or process into key categories or steps, like scenes in a movie, and then brainstorm ideas within each category, often using visuals like sketches or post-its. It helps visualize the whole concept step by step and identify areas for innovation within each step.
Wow, that's a lot of techniques. What's the final takeaway here?
I think the overarching point is about actively looking for alternatives. We have such a strong natural tendency to stick with the first solution that comes to mind, or the way things have always been done. Creative geniuses, productive thinkers constantly fight that tendency. They're always looking for new ways of seeing, new ways of thinking, alternative approaches, even when the current way seems perfectly fine.
So, to sum up, shifting from reproductive thinking, just reusing old solutions to productive thinking is really a conscious effort.
It is. It means actively questioning the assumptions we make, deliberately changing our perspectives using techniques like these, and employing specific methods to generate novel ideas and see the world and the challenges we face in fundamentally different ways.
It really feels like even the most familiar information holds so much untapped potential when you look at it through a more creative lens.
Absolutely. The same data, the same situation can look completely different depending on the mental tools you bring to it.
So here's something for you, the listener, to really think about. Which of these techniques we've talked about today resonates most with you? Is it word chains or reversals or maybe system mapping? And how could you actually apply just one of them to a challenge, big or small, that you're currently dealing with?
Yeah, give one a try.
We really encourage you to experiment, to play around with these tools and explore the exciting possibilities of unlocking your own productive and creative thinking.